Good morning. Today we are honored to welcome Sports Illustrated writer S.L. Price. He has interviewed 3 presidents and even played one-on-one with Barack Obama. Maybe he will tell us who won that match today. Mr. Price's work, the New York Times said, "The seasoned reporter is a master of new journalism. Whenever he writes about sports or about the craft of writing, he hits it over the fence." Please join me in welcoming S.L. Price.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here in the land of Gronk and Jason Taylor and this great school. I really appreciate it. I am not a Western PA guy. I'm not from Pennsylvania. I'm from Connecticut. And I stumbled upon Aliquippa, which, sorry, is this school 5A?
Yes.
5A. So I stumbled upon Aliquippa, which is a smaller class school. I don't know if everybody here is familiar with Aliquippa. I mean, even before this book, you're familiar with it? Yeah? And I went up there for Sports Illustrated to write a story. And it was a pretty basic story about football and how they continue to keep winning championships, even though the entire town has sort of buckled under the weight of the loss of the steel mill and drugs and crime and so on and so forth. It's a story that a lot of people know, not just about Aliquippa, but many former steel towns. I wrote a story. It was the longest story I'd ever written for Sports Illustrated. It was 10,000 words about Aliquippa, and it was essentially about that, about how they keep winning, what it is about that place, what it is about the spirit of the town, even though this is a town that was once nearly 30,000 people. It's now down to, I think it's 9,700 and shrinking. And yet, they keep winning. I mean, last year was about as horrible a year as you can imagine a high school program, and frankly, just flat out a high school going through. This is a place at this point, the school has maybe 3 dozen boys in the senior class. And so that we're talking about a really small school. Everybody knows everybody else. And again, I don't know the makeup of where you all live, but if you live in a small town like Aliquippa, people say one of the great things about a small town is that everybody knows everything about everybody else. And you sort of never get past that, and it's in your bones. And the most terrible thing about a small town is that everybody knows everything about everybody else, and you can't get away from these faces and places. But Aliquippa last year had this incredibly wrenching chain of events, starting with, in the summer before last season, Savante Gilliam, quarterback of the 2003 state championship team, 2-time veteran in Afghanistan, and medal winners and hero, and the quarterback of that 2003 team that had Darrelle Revis on it, who until recently is a Hall of Fame caliber defensive back. Savante Gilliam was found dead with a bullet in the back of his head on an Aliquippa street. And about a month after that, one of the defensive players on the team committed suicide. And then DeMonte Bronow, who was an incredible running back and had to miss the previous year because he had come down with cancer and had vowed to come back and play, and had gone pretty quickly into remission, was diagnosed with cancer again. And they played the entire season with him weakening, and he died right near the end of the season. And Aliquippa, this is a team that really had no business winning anything more than 3 games last year on paper. Not only that, they're a Class A school, and they moved up to AAA, 3A last year. And they've always played 2A, and they're a Class A school, and they moved up to 3A, which just seemed sort of insane There were a lot of people who actually thought maybe they should move down because the town is shrinking, the rosters are shrinking. And by the end of last year's season, they had just 30 guys on the football team. They still went to the Whitfield final and lost, and they still won 10 games. And this year, they're 8-0. They've given up 1 offensive touchdown, and they're number 1 in the state. And this place is, as one of your teachers right here will tell you, because she's taught there, is strangely special. There's no other place like it. I am not from Aliquippa. And if you go down the street in Aliquippa, it looks like a war zone. And I don't mean bullets are flying, but buildings are bombed out or torn down. There are gaps throughout the downtown area, which used to be thriving. And yet, I spent 6 years working on this book there, and people would say, man, why do I spend so much time there? And I miss it. I miss it now. And that's really weird. It's not my hometown. But there's a quality through the suffering and the pain and the loss that has happened there, loss of jobs, loss of brothers, loss of fathers, that has sealed this sort of incredible spirit in with the toughness. I mean, the coach, Mike Zmianek, likes to say, we don't stab you in the back here in Aliquippa. We turn you around and get you right in the chest so you can see us coming. And that's very true. I don't mean it's true they stabbed you in the chest when they saw me coming. But what it is there's no spin. There's no, I'm going to swear, right? Okay, there's no bullshit. And it's because I have never been, I spent a lot of time in Cuba when a lot of athletes were defecting. I went there 7 different times. And when I went to Cuba, everybody was in the same boat of suffering with the demise of communism. And it was basically the Great Depression in Cuba when I was there. And you couldn't hide. Everybody knew whose father had lost their job or had no job. And again, I'm speaking about Aliquippa as well. They're parallels. So as a result, nobody tried to front, nobody tried to hide, nobody tried to say that things were better than they were. And they were so open about their histories and their stories that it was bracing. And over, and this is, has anybody, I'm not going to ask you, you finish the book, but this is a tough story. This is not rah-rah, sis, boom, ba. They're winning, but there's a lot of pain in this book. And I will tell you, not one person from Aliquippa has said to me, man, why did you write all that negative stuff? Because over and over when I was writing it, they're like, tell it like it is. Don't sugarcoat it. Write it like you're from Aliquippa. Do us right. And it was really important for me to, it was really important for me to do that. I'm an outsider. You know how it is in Western PA. Everybody here is incredibly proud of being in Western PA. And somebody who's not from here to come in and write a biography of their town and essentially take their stories and tell them. It's a risky business. I mean, stories, I don't know how, what's going on with you guys, but stories are the most valuable things we have about ourselves. You might hook up with somebody, right? You might make out with them at a party. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? But, it's kind of casual. You're not going to tell them the story of your life. What happened to my dad? What happened to my sister? Why I'm the way I am? We didn't have money. We had no money. Our house is falling apart. You're not going to talk about those things. Or this is my dream. This is what I really want, to somebody casual. You hold on to that story until you find somebody special to give it to. And there's a moment when you get with somebody you care about where you guys tell each other your stories. It's one of the most valuable things, if not the most valuable things we have. Because it's our motivation, it's what keeps us going, and in essence, it is who we are. And so we don't give that away lightly. And I think all of you know what I'm talking about. You're not going to tell that story, and all of you have one, to just about anyone. And that's how people were with Aliquippa. I mean, they had a story to tell, and they weren't going to just give it away. And so they really insisted, tell it right. And so that was incredibly important to me, and I took it as a real responsibility. I want to read you one, if you don't mind. I want to read you a short passage from here because it involves Wilkinsburg, which is how far from here?
Up the street.
Okay. So the reason I chose it because I know it's nearby, and it may be that you guys have read this part because your teachers might have assigned it to you. But it's important because it's sort of what is, it speaks a lot to how the current coach, Mike Zmianek, who is now the all-time winningest coach at Aliquippa. And, you know, the interesting thing about Zmianek is that he never played high school football or basketball for the team. And he was a basketball player. He was a great pickup basketball player. But he's a very cocky, sardonic, likes to sort of, it's not a pose, it's who he is, but his attitude toward the world is that that's no big deal. And not only that, but I know what I'm talking about, and I'm gonna say it straight. He's a straight shooter, and he also has very little tolerance for teenage bullshit and for people trying to get over on him. And he's pretty funny and he's very smart. And but he's under, you know, believe it or not, you know, Aliquippa, they like their football, so he's under constant criticism no matter what they do. And you know, he's constantly, people are saying, well, it's your offense is too conservative, and you know, you should win every year, and any coach could win here. You know, it's just the talent is so incredible that you know, you're just a caretaker, and you know, it's absurd, but there it is. You're always going to have critics. So I'm just going to see if I can read this here. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read this to you. 15 years later, after Zmianek had become the winningest coach in Aliquippa history, never mind the Yanessa partisans. Yanessa was one of the previous epic, legendary coaches at Aliquippa. Led by his wife Elaine, dismiss any Quips record set, as she says, with a Little Sisters of the Poor 2A schedule. Zmianek sat in the football office at Aliquippa High and fielded a question about his successor. That's not my domain, he said, and whoever it is, and I'm not saying this arrogantly, has a problem. Because you don't follow Bear Bryant. Does everybody know who Bear Bryant is? Bear Bryant is the legendary coach at Alabama. He was sort of the template of really every football coach for an extremely long time. He sort of sat and leaned back against the goalpost with a matchstick in his mouth and a houndstooth hat on, and won a ton of football games. And anyway, he was legendary. You don't follow Bear Bryant. This is Zmianek. I'm trying to be modest, but you don't follow somebody who has that kind of record. The guy who followed Bear Bryant, the guy who's following Joe Paterno, those are tough. The guy that followed Ashman, the original coach at Aliquippa, crashed. The guy that followed Yanessa crashed in his own way too, because he didn't do it right. Sure, that's another shot at Morocco, Frank Morocco, and if you spend any time around the 72-year-old Zmianek, it's to be expected. Coaches are always defining themselves in relation to their predecessors. The profession's reliance on scorekeeping demands it. But bluntness is also part of Zmianek's public persona, the way he has always distinguished himself. He delights in being contrary, in deflating hype, and the notion that coaching takes some kind of genius in telling truths no one wants to hear. When critics say he's not the schmoozer Yanessa was or as warm as Morocco, he hardly takes it as an insult. He had no great ambition to coach in Aliquippa, he says. He could walk away from it any time. No one has ever said Zmianek wasn't smart. Those same critics call him uncaring, distant, skewer him from the stands for his predictable play calling. But his mind and sharp tongue, not to mention an impeccable sense of timing, keep most off balance. Indeed, Zmianek had turned down the Aliquippa football job when Yanessa left, and the head basketball coach when legend Red McNee retired in '93, because he knew you don't follow Bear Bryant. The fact that Zmianek never played football or basketball anywhere, even on a high school level, was a black mark for any coach anywhere, never mind one taking up the reins in Aliquippa. I'm not going to read all of this, hold on a second. All right. Yes, Zmianek could coach. It was unquestionable. His football defenses surrendered just 6 points a game for 5 years in the 80s. He just won the state title in his first year as Aliquippa hoops coach. Hell, when he turned his hand to girls basketball at Baldwin, they started winning there too. More to the point, his teams, like his classes, behaved. You never saw a Mike Zmianek team running up the score or swarming a prone opponent and stomping his face. His first year, 1997, Zmianek followed Morocco's WPIL championship with a shutout loss in the first round of the playoffs. The next 2 years, his Quips lost in the WPIL semis. But long after he got rolling in football, plenty like to say that anyone could win in Aliquippa. Whenever Zmianek coached, teams fell short, even after he won his own state title and 6 WPIL championships, even while headed from 2008 to 2015 to 8 straight WPIL title games. You heard it. With the talent Aliquippa produces, with all those tough and swift players that keep Division 1A scouts coming year after year, with all the fathers and uncles pushing them to defend the family name, a coach in Aliquippa doesn't have to do anything but keep him healthy and out of jail. Few ideas chafe Zmianek more. Mention it, and he'll start off flip and end up on fire. Well, this is my comeback for that. I don't really have much of one because I don't really give a fuck what they think, he said. But from 1965 to 71, Aliquippa was 12-51-2. Same type players. The difference between those teams and this team now is there were 6 times as many kids in school, 6 times as many boys, and the same kind of kids. So you have to account for that somehow. I would be the first to tell you there's always players here. There are players when I was a kid. There'll be players here when I'm gone. That doesn't mean you win. There are players in Monessen and Charleroi, other traditional football towns, Wilkinsburg. Lots of coaches have good players, but no clue what to do with them. You can take a woman who's a 5 and make her an 8. You can't make her a 10 no matter how hard you try. There's lots of motherfuckers who take 9s and make them 4s. I've taken 8s and made them at least that, at least. And by the way, the MF, okay? In Aliquippa, that's almost a term of endearment, all right? I mean, I'm serious. I mean, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, that is
Carried
like,
it with
that's
me.
like how you doing in Aliquippa, all right? Wilkinsburg is a name that comes up often with Zmianek. The borough just east of Pittsburgh, home of the world's first commercial radio station, thrived like many towns in Allegheny and Beaver counties in the 50s and was a WPIL football power. Now the population is half the size, its schools are penniless, and crime dominates. The team is a Class A afterthought. Once it seemed like anybody could win there, too. I wouldn't downplay this talent for a second, Zmianek said. Anybody can win here, might be right, but not everybody can look right, act right, play right, do it right. They may very well be fucking right. I don't count our success in wins and losses. I count our success in those young men who talk to you, who know how to talk to you, and have respect for their opponents and their teammates and all. And by the way, Aliquippa players are unbelievable in terms of dealing with any adult. Yes, sir. No, sir. They're incredibly under control, and that is definitely, and by the way, yesterday, an Aliquippa player was sentenced to 34 years base for his involvement in a murder. That was the thing I left out. The other thing about last year's football team, 2 football players were arrested for a double murder that happened during a drug deal over $160. And one of them was just sentenced yesterday to 34 years. So I'm not saying they're choir boys, but when they're on that football field, when they're in that uniform, it's an unbelievably gracious, polite, and responsible group of kids. He brings up his basketball predecessor, Jim Deep, who coached there from 1993 to 96 and finished 53-30. Jimmy Deep won here, as Zmianek said. Jimmy Deep came in from Ambridge and won in basketball here. His first year won the state championship. But at Christmas time that first year, I'm trying to think of the kid's name, he's in jail in Florida right now. They're in the gym practicing and Jimmy tried to throw the kid out. And the kid said, "You'll fucking leave before I will." Deep called the police. Police came, my friend Dennis Riggins came up, and the kid told him the same thing. "You take him the fuck out of here before you take me." And guess what? Kid never missed a second of playing time. They won a state championship. Is that what you want? If that's what you want, okay. We could be Wilkinsburg that fucking fast. We were close to Wilkinsburg until the right people, including me, took over. So that's your football coach at Aliquippa. And that, by the way, that attitude is very Aliquippa. I mean, people are just up front, and if you don't like it, too bad. We're still going to kick your ass. So I don't want to sit here and natter at you. I'm happy to take questions. Yeah, I played basketball against Obama. I can talk all about that. And I know what question everybody wants to know about that game. But anyway, I'll just open it up. The other thing is, just real quick, this is important. It's unbelievable to me that nobody wrote this book before me. Because this place, I cannot tell you how important it is and how many incredible people came out of this town and how it was the basis of the most important Supreme Court case when it came to unionization in America. It was the test case there. It's the home of incredible musicians. It's the home of Pete Maravich, one of the greatest basketball players ever. I can go on and on. Madonna's father, Jesse Steinfeld, the first Surgeon General. Terry Francona, the manager of the Indians, his father is from Aliquippa. He moved out and Terry's from New Brighton, and everybody says that Tito, his dad, moved out, and he was a great baseball player as well. And when, he's been gone for 70 years, and he said, "Fuck that, I'm still from Aliquippa. Don't say I'm from New Brighton." And so there's an incredible pride there. So, but what I was going to tell you is, I grew up. And lived in a town that I did not think was all that interesting. And what I'm saying to you is Wilkinsburg, the reason I bring it up, the reason I bring up why I'm stunned that nobody wrote this book, is that I think we have a tendency in looking at our own hometowns and our own families, because it's so normal, it's the air you live and breathe, you don't realize how incredible a story it is. And what I'm saying is that all of you here have an incredible story, especially Western PA, because Western PA is actually important to the history of this country in a way that some places are not. And I'll guarantee you, if you look at your family and the pathologies and the drives and the achievements, small or large, of your family, there is a story around you if you're paying attention. But you have to break out of sort of that hometown feeling and actually stand back and say, what are the elements of a good story? And then you'll realize you might be sitting right on top of it. And that is why I sort of brought up Wilkinsburg, because this is, Aliquippa is a town that is going to really have a hard time surviving. It's eventually going to disappear. But Wilkinsburg, being near Pittsburgh, is a town that could possibly recover, just because of geography. The problem with Aliquippa is that it's way up downriver, and really there's no reason for it to be there, because it was created solely for steel. And that kind of industry doesn't exist anymore. But my point overall is, just look around you. There are stories to tell, and you don't have to write them. You can tell them with your phone. You can tell them, in many different ways these days. And the access and the ability to write stories or tell stories is more widespread and universal than it's ever been. But all you got to do is open your eyes and pay attention, and look at your family, and look at your world, and look at your neighborhoods and your city. And I'll guarantee you that, give yourself permission to understand that where you live and what you're living through is a story worth telling. So anyway, I'm here for questions.
Who would like to start? All right.
When you were in high school, did you play any sports? And how do you cover sports that you're not really familiar with?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last one.
When you're in how do you cover sports that you aren't really familiar with?
That's a great question. I wrestled for 2 years and should not have, because I'm not built like a wrestler. It was kind of a stupid move. And my family had no money, so I started working at 16. And really, if I was going to play anything, it would have been basketball. And I played a lot of basketball all the time. And I became a better basketball player after I left high school. I went to University of North Carolina my last 2.5 years, and the basketball there was out of control. And so you had to be pretty good. I mean, I wasn't playing at North Carolina, but I'm saying in that community. And so, as for the I'm a parachute guy. I drop into a lot of situations in which I don't know what the hell's going on. And my job is to report so hard, read everything, talk to everybody, so that at some point I can convince myself, wrongly usually, but enough to convince myself that I know not only what I'm talking about, but eventually I know more than anybody else. And I'll give you an example. Everybody who grew up in Aliquippa knows more than, just by waking up, knows more about this subject than I'll ever know as an outsider. On the other hand, nobody at this point now knows more about Aliquippa than me, start to finish, 100 years. On a less deep level, but I can't tell you how many people came up to me and said, I didn't realize that. And that's just because I immersed myself in it. I'll give you a perfect example. I was living in Europe in 2004, and my bosses said, hey, can you go to India, to Pakistan and write about cricket? And I've never seen a cricket match, and know nothing about it, and everybody in America's bored when they just hear the word cricket, right? And so I had to go to, and this was about the first time that Pakistan and India, who are arch rivals, and by the way, cricket in Pakistan and India is like pickup basketball here. I literally, you would be driving and kids would be playing cricket in between the highway, okay? There was blind cricket, there was crippled cricket. I mean, it is the street sport in this area. So nobody knows that. And not only that, but India was touring Pakistan, the Indian national team, for the first time in 14 years because they've gone to war 4 different times, and both of them have nuclear weapons, and they hate each other. And the rivalry is insane. And this was the first time, and everybody expected this series to blow up into, because the last time, it became bloody riots whenever they played. So I had to not only become an expert in cricket, but I had to become an expert in Muslim-Hindu relations, nuclear history, and the history of the 1947 partition of India and the creation of Pakistan for Sports Illustrated. And I am delusional enough so that eventually I got to the point like, yeah, I know enough to do that. So but it's because I immerse myself into the subject so deeply that I can fool myself into thinking I know what I'm talking about. But sometimes I do.
All right, who's next?
How do you stay focused on one topic?
Well, you can already see that it's difficult for me to do because I've been bouncing all over like a pinball. I mean, I don't think I'm ADD, but I just get really excited about it. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but the fact is that you can't do anything well unless you have passion. That's all there is to it. I don't care. I mean, you can be the best athlete in the world, and there are plenty of them who are great physical athletes, but don't love what they're doing, and you can see it. And those are the ones who end up not working as hard, and eventually they get overtaken by people who work hard. And the fact is that the only way that you work hard is through love. If you love something, you'll do it when nobody's looking. I call it the default mode. It's like, what do you do when no one's looking? And basically, are you drawing? Are you reading? Are you watching sports? Whatever it is, that in many ways is very key to understanding your passion. And I love talking to people, and I love researching stuff. I mean, here we are in a library. I'm going to nerd out for you, but I mean, I had never done archival research in the library before. I did this in the sense of real deep stuff in the Library of Congress, and I was researching, and I did Penn State archives and the Pitt archives, and at one point I was researching Cornelia Bryce Pinchot, the first lady of Pennsylvania, the governor's wife, who was a crusading lady who helped break the totalitarian, essentially, aspect, the police state aspect of J&L in the 30s. And she came in crusading, wearing a red dress, knitting, just this unbelievably larger-than-life figure. And I was in the library reading letters written between her and FDR, Eleanor Roosevelt, and the letter's in your hands. See, for that for me was a thrill. I mean, I just couldn't freaking believe that I was doing that and sitting there reading that. So, if I'm excited about something, I can focus, and in fact, I'm sort of relentless.
What is the place that you go to write? Like, just where's the comfortable place that you would feel? Yeah.
No, it's a great question. I mean, my kids laugh at me because I'm known as the man in the basement. You know, I have a basement office, and look, writing is, for me anyway. I mean, my wife, who was a former reporter, and my son, who's just annoying. They're incredibly fast, natural writers. I was a horrible writer in high school. In fact, I didn't write in high school. And I'll make this clear to you. I was a terrible student in high school until the middle of my junior year. And the only thing that saved me was that I read a ton on my own, and I loved history. But my grades were crap, my attitude was crap, I was kind of an asshole. I mean, there's a lot of... And I really didn't come to writing until I went to college. And I was a terrible, terrible writer. And I'm not, like, exaggerating. I mean, I went to the University of North Carolina, and a couple of years ago, they had this massive scandal. A lot of fake classes. 3,100 students were taking these lame classes in the African American Studies department. They just got off. They just sort of skirted NCAA trouble. It's kind of a lame thing, work by the NCAA. And I had worked for the school newspaper there, and I thought I was like, oh man, I was kicking ass. I was like, and I went back and read my stuff, and there is just nothing more embarrassing than going back and reading understanding just how bad you were. I mean, I wanted to punch that guy in the face. I mean, so I was a bad writer, but I kept the best way to become a better writer is reading, and the one natural thing I have is a sense of rhythm. To me, writing is a song, and I write late at night, and that just because it's quiet. And there's something, I'm a nighttime person in general, and I will write till 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And I'm lucky that I have a situation where I can do that. My wife works, so I'll get up at this is not the same now, but when I was working on the book, I would get up at like noon, go through what I had done the night before, stop, eat, whatever, and then maybe around 10 o'clock p.m. really start hammering it in, and I would get done around 3 in the morning. But it's not easy. Every once in a while you get on a roll and you're like, wow, this is great, and you think the next day it's going to be great, and the next day you're there, damn, you're banging your head on the desk. So you never know. You never. I mean, I've been doing it 35 years. You never know when it's going to be great. You never know when it's going to be a work. But you got to plant yourself in the chair. That's the other thing. When it comes to writing, inspiration has nothing to do with it. Even if you're like the most beautiful writer, you got to plant your butt in the chair and write as much as possible every day, even just a little bit, so you get in the habit of doing it.
What advice do you wish you could give yourself at the beginning of your career as a writer?
As a writer?
And
well, I mean, I wouldn't have changed anything. I mean, first off, I was lucky because when I came out of college, newspapers were thriving. In fact, they were making money hand over fist, 20% profits every year. I mean, it was unbelievable. They had Craigslist, so they were able to hire somebody who had potential, even though they stunk, me. And that isn't the case anymore with newspapers, just about anybody. I mean, there's no places that are making so much money they can say, well, he might work out. Everything's much tougher. I wouldn't get a job coming out of college today. But I got lucky, and that I was born when I was born. I mean, that's essentially it. I'd like to think it was me, but I was lucky. I wouldn't do anything different. I think I would have just been a better person. When I was in high school, like I said, I was a bit of a jerk. I was really mouthy. and I could make fun of people, and I regret that. I hurt some people, and I don't like that person I was then. I wish I was a better person.
How do blogs and free media affect the quality of journalism?
Say that one. Just say the first part again.
How do blogs and free media affect the quality of journalism?
Blogs and free media?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's you just asked like literally the central question of our time in print media. Like literally, I believe, some people may disagree with me, that I mean, I don't know when Gutenberg printed the Bible at this point. You know, that began the print age. I think we're at the end of the Gutenberg era, which is people reading and getting their information through print, obviously. They're still going to read. There's still going to be books. It'll be niche, but it's no mistake that like 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, novelists were superstars. They were pop culture icons. They were on the cover of magazines and stuff like that. Ernest Hemingway was a rock star. You know, I mean, literally. That has completely altered the equation, the rise of blogs, the internet. It has blown up print media, and it is we're now at an existential crisis. I mean, because great journalism, doing the work of investigating takes a certain cockiness and confidence, and it turns out that cockiness and confidence for journalists comes from money. And I don't mean their salary. I mean that the organ they're working for is confident and feels they can take on the biggest industry in town and not worry about losing that advertiser. Is confident that they can take on the biggest politician in town or the political machine or whatever and not worry about losing customers or readers who just say, we don't want your subscriptions. Journalism today has a crisis of confidence, and it's because the entire business model has been gutted by what's gone on, and it hasn't been replaced. I mean, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is a great newspaper, but it's thinner than ever was, and the staff has been cut, just like Sports Illustrated, just like everywhere. And you know, it's funny because when I was writing this book, I was. There were certain times where I'm like, why am I so invested in this place? I'm not, my dad wasn't a steel worker. You know, I didn't come from here. And part of it was, I'm a Polish, my grandfather actually worked for Pittsburgh Plate Glass in New Jersey, so I have a little bit of that Pittsburgh thing back in my mind. But I realized that it's because it's different. But I'm basically in the middle of working for an industry that is collapsing because of massive shifts in how humans are consuming that product. And friends of mine are losing their jobs all over the place. I will eventually probably lose my job. That's just the way it is. I could feel that pain because I know so many people who have been sort of caught in the crushing sort of forces that are now at work in the print industry. Thank you. That was a great question.
Hi. As I have kind of a nerdy question. As a former librarian and English teacher, I look at the back of the book.
Yeah.
You have 80 pages of notes, footnotes.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for the students to hear about, in this day of alternative facts,
Yeah.
I think it's important for students to understand, research was always a bugaboo with the kid.
Right.
I used to work here and, you know, getting kids to do research and understanding why you need citations and things like that. But I was just wondering, I was just hoping that you could address that with the kids.
Yeah,
and thank you for the shout out to the librarians at the Jones and the Laughlin
heroes.
Those librarians.
They're not librarians, and I'm serious. I'm not saying it just because she's being nice to me. Librarians and these research people are the absolute unsung heroes of nonfiction writing. And and by the way, I did it for selfish reasons. I mean, I did it because I wanted to be bulletproof, because I knew, well, first of all, two things, is that I had to research, I'm an interview guy, like, and when I first did the book, this is my second version. When I first did the book, I basically started in 1945, and I was going to have a chapter sort of on the history of Aliquippa before that, because I figured it had been written so many times, the rise of steel mills, and that it didn't need to be done again. And my first interview with a living person was Aliquippa's first championship was baseball, and they WPIL, and they won it. They were playing on June 5th, 1944, and the captain of the team was told, "Hey, if you guys win today, you'll be on the front page of the paper tomorrow." It was an afternoon paper, and they won. They came to Pittsburgh. They played at Forbes Field. They won their Aliquippa's first ever championship, and that morning D-Day happened, and so they were knocked off the front page. So I was going to start with that, and that's still in the book, but my editor rightly said, no, you need to tell us how the town really came to be. You got to go into detail. And everybody's dead before 1945, especially anybody who was an adult in those days. So I had to do a lot of archival research. So that you definitely have to cite. You can't, it's plagiarism if you don't. But the second thing was, even for the post-1945 stuff, I felt I got to be bulletproof because I am an outsider. And people are going to say, well, what do you know? And how do you know this? And they're going to be suspicious of it. And not only that, but there's a lot of dodgy incidents in here that people didn't know. And I needed to document them because it's a very sensitive story, and I wanted to be responsible. I mean, the parameters of this book dictated it, but I also had a selfish reason. I knew that it was going to be looked at closely by people who dearly love Western Pennsylvania history, and I wanted to make sure that I had covered my bases.
What's the most frustrating thing about being a paid writer?
Not being paid enough. You know what? There's nothing frustrating about it. I mean, except when you get in front of the typewriter, in front of the keyboard. I mean, it's a gift. It's an absolute gift. I can't believe anybody has paid me to do this. I can't believe that I got 4 books published. As I said, I was a terrible writer. So I'm a con man. I put it over, that somehow people like. But honestly, like I said, the industry's going through tough times. I have nothing to complain about. I came from no money. Okay, I worked my way through college. When I graduated college, University of North Carolina, I paid my way through school, and I didn't pay for my entire final semester. I just left school. Like I finished my classes, but I couldn't get my diploma, and they wouldn't release my transcripts until I paid off a couple thousand, $4,000 for my last. And I couldn't apply for a job or whatever. So I went home and I waited tables, and I was the worst waiter you had ever seen. I mean, I worked in a lunch joint where that literally, like, they had one rush. Like, you got there at 11 o'clock, and the rush would start at 11:30. And there was like a half dozen older women who worked there who were like wizards. I mean, because you had to bus your own table. So you would wait on people, and you had to bus it and get it cleaned up for the next table to come in. And I mean, every one of their tables was pristine, like boom, boom, boom. They were magicians. And then you'd look over at my section, and it looked like a bomb went off, like just napkins. I mean, it was just, and they took pity on me and would help me clean up. But I just was terrible, and I had sent out a bunch of resumes and from my clips from college to newspapers all over the country, and I came home. I remember this day, and I'm wearing like a polyester shirt, and I'm stink, and I've got like this dopey polyester vest on, and my mom says, oh, so this guy from the Sacramento Bee, which is a newspaper in Sacramento, called and says he wants to know if you want to cover the 49ers. And I'm like, the San Francisco 49ers, right? And so I call him back, and I'm standing there in my stink and horrible uniform, and my tables are all a mess, and and he's like, yeah, would you be interested in covering the San Francisco 49ers? I'm like, yeah, I think I might be interested. So I mean, I don't have any, there's nothing hard about it in the sense of, there are definitely frustrations. I mean, I'm a reporter, I'm not a creative writer, I need people to talk to me. But essentially I'm that weird guy. Like, if I had it my way, I would travel around the world and ask people questions. I do that all the time. My kids, like, they bring their friends over and they're like, oh God, and he's gonna start asking questions. And then I ask their friends questions. I'm like known for that. But they're interesting to me. Like, I like talking to people. And so I would do it for free. But instead of being that weird guy who's coming up to you and like, because I work for Sports Illustrated or because I work for the Miami Herald or the Sacramento Bee, people are like, yeah, I guess I should talk to that guy. Yeah. So it's all a gift to me. That's a great question, though. Thank you.
This will be our last question.
No, she gets a question too. Yeah.
What's one thing a beginner writer should avoid?
You know what? You shouldn't avoid anything. You should avoid plagiarism. You should avoid copying. But you should try everything, and you should steal from everybody. And I don't mean steal, information or blocks of type, but style. You should read everything. And if you're interested in sports, you should read everything but sports, because you're going to read sports. But you should read because I can't tell you how many other ways of writing have influenced my sports writing. You should just leave yourself wide open and not settle on a style yet, and experiment like hell. Does that help?
Is it difficult to separate personal beliefs and stay objective as a writer?
What is that stuff on your face? What? Stickers for the school? It's what?
Girls Rock Science.
Okay, cool. Is it difficult to remain objective? Is that the question?
Is it difficult to separate personal beliefs and stay objective as a writer?
Yeah, but I believe objectivity is a joke. I think that every single thing you write is subjective. How I place my paragraphs is subjective. I'm a human being. I don't worry so much about being objective as much as I do about being fair and getting all sides. That doesn't mean, like, eventually I may dismiss somebody's view as nonsense or self-serving and not part of the story that is necessary, or a distraction. But that's my job, is to take it all in, not judge in one sense, even though in the end I'm judging all the time. It's a weird balance, but it's a really good question, because, and to me, the two most important qualities are not necessarily objectivity. In fact, like I said, I think it's a false sort of construct, but fairness and compassion and respect. I mean, like I said at the beginning, you give me your story, that's a gift. It's a gift to me, and to what I'm doing. It's because people don't give it away lightly. So, and not only that, but I don't see things in black and white. It's not, and more than anything, because it's not interesting. I mean, our entire world now is like left, right, you suck, I'm the best, blah blah blah, and nobody wants to, and it's supposedly mushy in the middle. But I actually think that most of us have some black, some white. We're some good, some bad. It's very, very rare. I mean, I've never met anybody who's purely evil or purely good. And to tell you the truth, if I did, it'd be kind of boring. I think it's more interesting to try and wade through the gray and figure people out that way.
Let's thank Mr. Price for being here with us today.
Yeah.
Thank you. Those are great questions. Appreciate it. Better questions than most reporters.